You're listening to The Rule of Law, the educational podcast sponsored by Allrise, where we focus on the intersection of law, technology, and storytelling. And now, here's your host, Lauren Round.
Welcome to Rule of Law. In today's episode, we sit down with Sateesh Nori, Senior Legal Innovation Strategist at Just Tech. We discuss Sateesh's experience working in New York City Housing Court, how AI will redefine legal services, and the next generation of lawyers. Sateesh, welcome to the podcast. Where are you recording from?
Hey, Lauren. It's great to be here. I'm in Brooklyn, New York.
Brooklyn, New York. Well, welcome. So we always start the show with an icebreaker, and I know you are a big Substack writer. So your question is, who is your favorite Substack author?
Well, right now it's probably Paul Krugman, who left the New York Times and has been just unleashing his wisdom on Substack. So it's interesting to see how technology can free people from the constraints of traditional media and traditional roles. So it's really exciting. Check it out if you haven't read Paul Krugman on Substack.
Paul Krugman. Okay, I'll check it out. Yeah, I love seeing that transition with people who leave big established media companies and go out on their own and, like you said, kind of unleash everything that's possibly been pent up over the last years when they've kind of been under editorial control. So I'll definitely check that out. And everyone listening, also go check out Sateesh's page. He has lots of hot takes on the legal industry, and there's some good reads there. So, all right, before we dive in, if you could just take us through your bio a little bit, tell us a little about your background and how you ended up at Just Tech.
Sure. So I'm a lawyer. That's kind of my primary identity. And I always wanted to go to law school, like from an early age. I thought thinking about ideas, debating pros and cons, and coming up with solutions was a great job. And then you think about all the TV shows and movies about lawyers, and you think, this is going to be a really exciting gig. But then you go to law school and you realize, like, oh, it's not like that at all. It's a lot more dry. It's about hitting the books and drafting and redrafting arguments and papers and spending a lot of time back and forth on email or phone calls, doing discovery. And I thought, wow, how do I get to go to court? Like, what happened to that dream of being the type of lawyer that I imagined I'd be? Underlying it all is also a need that I had to kind of stick up for the little guy. I always thought of myself as kind of an outsider. I wasn't born in America. I was born in India, and I came here when I was a child. And I never quite thought of myself as fitting in here. And so I had a kind of kinship with the underdog. Even though, I led a perfectly normal, privileged life and I had no hardships, I still thought of myself as somebody who's an outsider, someone who's a little shyer, someone who wasn't popular, and so on. So I thought, how do I tie those things together, being a lawyer and fighting for the underdog, fighting for what seems to be unfair and getting that corrected? And so I went into human rights work in law school, and I thought about these big issues like the right to food and the right to housing and the right to clean water. And there's so many areas in the world in which these are not guaranteed. And in some places, they've only gotten worse since I was in law school. And so I thought I'd be a human rights lawyer. But being a human rights lawyer is also not as fun and glamorous as you might imagine. And it's just a lot of research. And sometimes you're in places that are very difficult to live in, and you're far away from your family. And it's a tough life. And if you're lucky, you get a job as an academic or, in a big think tank or in a big human rights organization in a big city. But that's kind of boring too. It's the opposite, being in the field. So I applied for a job at Legal Aid when I graduated. And Legal Aid in New York City is the public defender They are also the provider of civil legal services for thousands and thousands of New Yorkers, people who can't afford to hire lawyers. And I got a job in the housing unit, and I didn't know anything about this. If I told you what I knew then, you'd be shocked that I do this work for a living, and I've been doing it for so long. I didn't know that my own apartment in law school was rent stabilized, and I was probably being overcharged. I didn't know about housing court. I'd never been there. I didn't know what it was like to be on public assistance or apply for public assistance and get rent assistance and so on. But what was great about that job is that I'm in court every day representing real people and trying to solve problems. So, fast forward to your question, and 20 years later, one of the things that's really difficult about being a lawyer in public interest, or probably being a lawyer in any field, is the repetition, the type of work that you have to do over and over again, the tedious boilerplate work that you might say to yourself, I'm a robot. I'm doing the work of a robot, right? I'm just doing the same stuff every day. And that's really draining and it's really demoralizing. And sometimes you wonder, am I really helping anyone if I'm just riding along the carousel ride with them? And we're back where we started in 6 months or a year. So that's where technology comes in. And I thought about ways in which technology can free us of the monotony, of the repetition, of the drudgery of being lawyers, because a lot of it is drudgery. It's pretty dry. And I realized, yeah, there's technology that can help you. Even things like, messaging your client is something that didn't exist when I started, like texting your client. There were literally payphones in the courthouse when I started, and lawyers would line up to use the payphone to call their clients. And then smartphones came out, and people were like emailing people in court. And it was like, this is amazing. I can't believe we're emailing people from court and getting stuff done this way. But even, 10 years ago, we were still faxing things to government agencies and the courts. And so it's a slow pace of progress. But now we have AI. And what does AI do? Well, it's like having a paralegal in your pocket. It's like having an investigator. It's like having a legal research buddy. It's like having a coach. It's like having a document editor. All that stuff 24/7 in your pocket on your desktop. And talk about liberating it for the first time gave me the sense that we could do more with less. We could help more people. We could eliminate all the stuff we hate about being lawyers, the repetition, the monotony, and we could go deeper into legal topics. We could help cases that are harder. And that's what led me to Just Tech, which is a tech consulting firm that for about 10 years has helped people, helped nonprofit orgs with their kind of tech needs, migrating to the cloud, changing your case management system, things that nonprofits don't have the budget to really do well. And Just Tech filled that gap. And now we're going into AI. Like, how can AI transform our practice? How can we become better lawyers? How can we help more people? How can we work more efficiently? And so that's what I'm doing now. And it's kind of lucky, I feel, because it ties together all the things that I always wanted to do as a young lawyer.
Well, we're definitely going to get to some additional questions on kind of the tech side of things. But before we do, I want to dwell for a second on your time in housing court because you were, as you mentioned, essentially on the front lines representing New Yorkers in and out of evictions, fighting landlords, helping them understand their rights. And that sounds as someone who never worked in that environment, that sounds like a really intense environment. So tell us a little bit more about your experience there and how it kind of shaped your view on the legal profession and the law.
Yeah, in fact, I wrote a book about it called Sheltered 20 Years in Housing Court. One of the things about housing court in a place like New York is probably more than half of the city has never been to housing court. They have no idea where it is, that there's one in every borough, and what happens there. But then the other half of New York goes there all the time, repeatedly. And why is that? Well, the first reason is it's really expensive to live in New York City. And a lot of people pay more than half of their monthly income towards their rent. So imagine what a burden that is if you're paying 50 cents on every dollar that you earn towards your rent, and it's just going away. You don't get to stay forever. You don't own it. You don't build any equity in it. It just goes away. And if you lose your job or you get sick, you're going to fall behind in your rent because you have no margin, you have no cushion. And so for half of New York, not half, but like hundreds of thousands of people who go to housing court every year, it's usually about rent. It's usually about falling behind in rent because of some crisis, job loss, death in the family, accident, whatever it might be. And so when you go to housing court, it kind of feels like Penn Station crossed with the DMV. It's just like a bunch of people. No one really knows where they're going. A lot of people are just waiting around, and often they're waiting to see some clerk or functionary who works at the court who's going to tell them yes or no, or come back another day and go through this all over again. That's what happens in housing court. So it's really shocking when you go in there and you think this is happening in 2025 in New York City. Like this is the way like justice works. It's horrible. Like the buildings are often in Brooklyn, for example, it's an old office building. It's not even a courthouse. So people are jammed in the hallways. They're not handicapped accessible. The bathrooms are gross. There's no drinking water. The fountains are just running dry. The elevators are jammed with people. Sometimes they're broken. In the summer, sometimes the air conditioning goes out, so it's really hot. There's no windows in the public areas, so you're just in a windowless space, jammed with other people who are really stressed out and sometimes yelling or crying. Fights break out between people. And at the end of the day, it's all about rent. And so it's really sad to think like all of this is just a fight over money that happens hundreds of times a day, every day, for hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers. And so housing is one of those areas where, the work that we do as tenant defense attorneys is very repetitive. Basically, most of the work that we're doing is saying, Judge, we applied for assistance to get the rent paid on behalf of this tenant, and we need more time to get the money. Please don't evict the family. It's the dead of winter. They're going to be homeless. It could be really bad. It could be bad for their health. The kids are going to miss school. They have an elderly grandma living with them, whatever the case may be. That's what we do every day over and over and over again. And we literally write the same papers, the same kinds of scenarios come up over and over again. So why not just use AI? And another question you can ask is, why can't the people who are in these situations kind of get help before it's a crisis and they need a lawyer, right? Is there a way for people to apply for assistance before they're in court? Is there a way for people to better understand how the court process works so they can raise defenses like, hey, I know I owe rent, but I don't have any heat. I don't have any cooking gas, right? What about that? And we just don't have a way to do that right now. But with AI, there are definitely models like ragbots, chatbots that can help get people that kind of information that helps them be better prepared. And on the other side, there are models and tools that lawyers can use to do this kind of work more efficiently, to get through more work every day and, get these results that we're kind of struggling to do right now. There aren't enough hours in the day. We literally file our own papers. Sometimes we pick up our own kind of rent assistance checks. We visit our clients' apartments. We do our legal research. We're printing and stapling and filing things. And I'm talking about the lawyers. Now, this is what we're doing. Think about how inefficient that is for the people who are supposed to be the experts doing the things that are just so ordinary, and take away their time to help more people as experts. It's just sad. So I'm really excited in the way that AI can change that dynamic.
I appreciate your reference to Penn Station. I take the A from Brooklyn to Penn Station a few times a week, and it is an overwhelming environment just if you're commuting. So adding the
Right.
legal element in there is, I can only imagine. So
Yeah.
before we get to some of the AI questions, I do want to kind of end this segment with your transition from practicing law, all of that being said, to kind of an adjacent industry. So it sounds like it was sort of a natural fit, but I mean, still, was it hard to make that leap? Were you relieved? Was it a hard transition? Tell us about making that jump.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, I'm still in that transition because I'm still kind of a lawyer part-time. I still have clients. I still teach at a law school, so I'm working with students who are representing people. And what's really difficult about it is like you wrap your identity up in your profession. You go to like cocktail parties and people say, "What do you do?" You're like, "I'm a lawyer," and that's it, right? You don't have to explain any more than that. And so it's hard to give that up. But what I realized is I didn't go to law school to work with other lawyers or to be a lawyer. In fact, that's the worst part. It's like working with other lawyers and interacting with them and socializing with them. I went to law school because I wanted to, use the law to help people and to solve problems, right? And if I think about it in that abstract sense, like what is the best way to solve problems, right? How do you help the most people with the least amount of time and resources? Well, use technology, right? So I had to ask myself, am I going to be more impactful helping like one client a day over, a long career? Or am I going to be more impactful, like thinking about ways that other people can do more with less and bring that to the table? And I realized it's the second one. I've already done the first one for 22 years, and there isn't much more impact I can have or anything different I can bring to that table. But if I think about the way that we work and bring some ideas and fresh perspectives and work alongside people who have more experience in tech, and I can really be transformative. I can really help change the way that we work and the way that access to justice works in America. 92% of the access to justice problems, the civil legal problems in America, go unaddressed every year. 92%. And so, what are all those Americans doing? They're doing things on their own. They're going on Reddit to search for answers. They're asking their uncle on Facebook. They're reading like TikToks. They're looking at TikTok videos about like how to do X, Y, or Z. That's really scary. And so the lawyers like me should make that kind of information more accessible, more available. We should be making TikToks. We should be making like, content that's actually accurate and helpful to people and delivering it to people in whatever language they speak, whatever kind of tech they use, platform, device, whatever. And so I figured that it's time to make a big jump and take a risk and say, let's go all in on this. And so far, it's been pretty productive and rewarding. A lot of people are interested in this. They are afraid, they're anxious. They don't want to be that one person who cites a case that's hallucinated in court, or the one person that makes a huge mistake because they used AI, right? But they also can think of a way to kind of, it's like the difference between bicycling and walking. Like it's tough in the beginning. You may fall off the bike a few times and it takes some practice. But once you learn how to ride a bike, boy, isn't life so much easier? Like getting from A to B. And that's the way like this stuff is right now. It's like teaching people how to ride a bike, getting them ready, training them, and then you take off the training wheels, and we're all going to be much faster and much more efficient. And that's the goal, right? The law should be accessible to everybody. We all own the law. Lawyers don't own the law, right? Judges don't own the law. They work for us. We're the people. We should be able to kind of use the law where it helps us, to benefit us, to protect us. And that's not happening right now. And so hopefully AI can do some of that work.
Yeah, I really like the analogy of riding a bike because, most of us did learn how to ride a bike successfully. And it's something that when we started, it seemed really difficult and impossible. And we eventually figured it out. So maybe the same thing can be applied to AI. On that note, I did want to get to some questions about your work in the AI space and starting out kind of high level. I think a big part of the conversation right now is using AI as a tool and how it can help attorneys do what they do today better. But on the other side of that, you also recently said that AI really isn't just another tool, it's more of a fundamental shift in how legal work is done. So, can you tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, some people think AI is the equivalent of a new iPhone or like the latest version of Microsoft Office. And it's a fad, and people are talking about it. And some people wait in line early to get their first look at it or be early adopters. And then eventually it'll just go away and be part of, the background, and we'll move on. But I think that's a mistake. AI isn't just like the latest tech fad. In fact, it's as big as the invention of the internet. Sometimes I say it's like the invention of fire. Like before, we were just like rubbing sticks together to make smoke. And now we have fire and we can do so much more with it. And sure, it's a little bit dangerous. Like it can burn you and it can get out of control. We don't know what's going to happen next. But for now, let's use it. Let's use it to do good things. And so, why is it so fundamentally different? Well, for the first time, large language models and GPTs are able to produce content. It's almost like a human level of ideation and creation. And that we've never seen before. It's shocking. Like every couple of months, some new tool comes out, and I'm shocked. I'm like, I can't believe this is real. I can't believe you can make a podcast in 3 minutes using Google's Notebook LM, and it sounds like real people, and they sound like experts. How is that possible? Or I can't believe that you can write a entire, letter to ask for help for someone's rent assistance in 1 second. Right? It used to take hours for us to do that kind of thing. So when you think about how powerful this stuff is, and the idea that we haven't even imagined all the ways we can use it, um, and if we think about how it might apply to the law, which is just a bunch of rules, right? It is so perfectly suited for a rules-based system like the law. Early AI models played chess. They played the game Go, and they became the best ever at those games, right? Better than the best human beings who ever played those games. Why? Because AI can understand rules-based systems. So what's the core process? What is the legal system? It's a rules-based system, right? And so why not apply that so that the average person can have the same power as the best lawyer in America, right? For free. That should be our goal. And so it's really such a fundamental shift that I think a lot of people who don't see it coming are going to be shocked. For example, law firms are built upon the billable hour, right? So you bill a client sometimes in 15-minute increments, and it's hundreds and hundreds of dollars per associate per hour to do like a legal research question or write a memo or a analysis of a legal issue. And all these associates go to, in the old days, they used to go to the library, look up the case law in the books, and then write it down and then type it out. Now they go to Westlaw or Lexis, they search, and then they're online, and then they type a memo out. Um, and that takes like dozens and dozens of hours, right? Well, now you can do that in 1 second. What took 20 hours can now be done in 1 second, right? How do you bill for that? How do you bill for 1 second? What do you do with the 20 or 30 or 100 associates you have? We're all hired under this model of the billable hour. It's pretty scary, right? People are going to have to reevaluate the way that law firms are built, the way that legal practice, the financial model of legal practice and break it all apart and kind of start from scratch. And what does that mean? What's going to happen? Well, one thing that may happen is the large law firm model is dead. The pyramid, these giant pyramids that are built in big cities all across the country with the partners on top and all the associates on the bottom, that's gone. It doesn't make financial sense anymore. But the good news is you may have a lot more small law firms that are more affordable for average Americans. And isn't that much better? That like the everyday average Joe now has a choice. They're going to have many more options that are low cost. And each of those options, each of those law firms is going to be able to operate at the same scale that the big law firms operated at before, because they can use AI for billing, for contracts, for HR, for paperwork. They can work remotely. They may not even need office space anymore. Like the whole model of legal practice is going to change. And hopefully it changes for the better so that there's more access to lawyers. The lawyers might make less at the top, but that's okay. Like the lawyers at the top in the big firms weren't helping anybody anyway. They're representing corporations who are fighting each other, right? So get rid of them and have more people in the middle, and the lower tiers might make less, but guess what? They're going to be doing much more meaningful work, much more interesting work. And maybe in 5 or 10 years, that's what we'll see. So people have to be prepared for that. Law schools have to be ready to teach that. Right now, law schools are still teaching to send their best students into corporate law firms to bill by the hour. They haven't changed that model one bit. So it's going to be a rude awakening for some of these law students when they get out of law school and realize like, wow, not only do I have like $200,000 in debt, but the job I thought I was going to get to pay that off doesn't exist anymore. It's irrelevant now, out of date, it's obsolete. So law schools have to be ready for that reckoning, and they've got to start teaching this stuff right now. What is the lawyer of the future going to be working on? How are they going to be working? And I'm actually writing another book about that called The Augmented Lawyer, The Future of the Legal Profession. And I'm exploring what working as a lawyer is going to be like in a couple of years with the evolution of AI. What is an associate at a law firm going to be doing? Are they going to be prompt engineers? Are they going to be managing knowledge bases for these RAG bots so that the AI has the relevant law and statutes at its fingertips to deliver to people? Are they going to be, coders? Are they going to be building kind of websites to deliver legal content to people? Like, what's a lawyer going to do in this coming world? The good news for nonprofit lawyers, though, is I think we're going to be able to do more. We're going to be able to be more specialized. We're going to be able to work on smaller teams and not need to work in large nonprofits that do kind of general work adequately, but don't do specific work extremely well. There's going to be a democratization of the law, where more people have access to basic legal concepts that they can use to help them, and more specialists who are going to be working on the harder problems at the end of the road. And I think that's more interesting work. But unfortunately, I think it means fewer lawyers. The law is going to be the same as, like real estate agents are now, or travel agents, or those kinds of jobs in which you can kind of find that information on your own now. You can book your own flight. There's apps and websites to do that stuff. And you only need to call somebody if it's complicated or there's some kind of crisis or you need to get somewhere fast. The law might become one of those types of fields. Accounting is probably going to go that way too. Imagine there's a TurboTax AI that's probably already in the works somewhere. and you're going to be able to file complex tax returns without the aid of an accountant for the fraction of the cost. That's going to be really hard for accountants, right, as a field, but better for the average person, especially someone who can't afford an accountant. Um, so I think the law is going to face that kind of reckoning.
We'll pause there for a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about how Generation Z is thinking about the legal profession and what the future of the legal industry looks like for clients.
Deploying new software technology can disrupt familiar workflows and processes, and it often comes with a steep learning curve for the employees in your law firm. We get it, but it doesn't have to be that way. All Rise is a comprehensive law practice management system deeply integrated with the Microsoft tools and technology you're already familiar with, so no steep learning curve is required. And because All Rise is a modular software platform, you can deploy only the specific capabilities you need when you need them. Your choice. If you want to streamline internal operations, boost staff productivity, and deliver superior client service, then take a close look at the AI-powered All Rise platform. It's time to experience software innovation that enables practice excellence. Learn more at allrise.ai.
So in that same vein, thinking about what that means for this next generation of lawyers coming up, and you have such a perfect insight into this, in your role as a professor at NYU. And so, what, for lack of a better phrase, what is sort of the vibe with your students? Are they excited? Are they scared? Are they sensing that there's this fundamental change? How are they working through that?
I think the students are using AI and they know about this stuff and they're kind of dialed into it. I think many law schools are telling people not to use AI, or that they're going to buy AI detectors that are going to reveal whether a student used AI in some kind of written work, or that if they use AI, they're going to lose their law license one day because it's going to hallucinate. And I think that's really sad and dangerous, that the mixed messages that law students are getting now are not helping them. Instead, law students should be kind of nurtured and given these tools and told to run with them. Let's see what you can do with this stuff. You are the perfect generation. You're going to be like growing up with this stuff. You're going to be learning how to work in a field with this stuff at your fingertips. Come up with new ideas. Like, let's change the world. And unfortunately, that's not happening yet. And it may happen as a reaction to lots of lawyers getting laid off one day because they're not ready for this stuff, or the market or the jobs have changed so much. But I think it's an opportunity. And that's why I'm writing the book, is to kind of help lawyers learn on their own if they're not being taught in their law school. What this stuff is, how does it work? How do you use it? What can you do with it? And how is your life going to be different as a legal professional when this stuff is commonplace? Be ready now. So let's see. I'm really hopeful that, a lot of people will figure this stuff out on their own, just because it's so common now. It's everywhere. Everyone's talking about it. But the law schools have to catch up. They have to catch up, or they're not offering anything of value to their students. They're doing their students a disservice if they don't teach this stuff right away.
And yeah, as you were talking about that, I think maybe this could even be an opportunity for a sort of realignment of how law schools are ranked. Maybe in the future it won't be who got a job clerking for a Supreme Court justice or how many people went to big law, but how many people, survived and were able to start firms in this new environment. So we could have a whole course on that, but it's good to talk to a current professor who's thinking about it in this way. One thing I wanted to ask you about, we talked a lot about making information more available to people so that they can sort of get help before they might seek an attorney. But something that is a growing part of the conversation is through all this technological change, how do we still sort of preserve the human side of law? Because, I mean, for many people, their experience with the legal system is one of the most important and the most personal of their lives. You know that better than anyone working in housing court. And I mean, this isn't true for every area of the law, but for some, I mean, the lawyer isn't just the lawyer. It's the person's guide, their client's guide, and their sounding board and their counselor even. So, I mean, how is that side going to evolve? Is it? And how do we preserve that through kind of AI and democratizing access to legal information?
Yeah, one of the ironies of the way that we work right now before AI is that we turn a lot of people away. A lot of people never get to talk to a lawyer, right? They're waiting in line, they talk to a paralegal, and they're told, you're not eligible, you don't live in the right zip code, we don't work in that zip code where you live. Your legal problem isn't one that we have funding to take on, or we just don't have any more people this month to help any new people. So come back later, right? And so, what's more dehumanizing than our current system? And so, when you think about, like, well, will AI take away that human element? Well, right now, people aren't getting any humans at all. No one's talking to anybody because there's no capacity. We don't have enough people to help all the people who need help. So, one thing that AI can do is help people solve easy problems and create capacity for the hard ones, right? So, if you're someone who has a smartphone and can interact with an AI chatbot, get the answer you need about, let's say, how to get the heat back on in your apartment, where to go, who to call, how to start the process, right? Well, then you're not going to go down and wait in line at the legal aid office in the courthouse, right? And maybe there's 10 or 15 or 20% of people like you who can get their answer ahead of time because they can use the technology. Well, then that's 15, 20% more capacity that the human lawyers and paralegals have to talk to the most vulnerable people or the people who have the harder problems, right? And so, in a way, AI could help get more access to human beings for the most vulnerable people by taking out of the line the easy cases. And that's a good thing, right? Right now, everybody's equal and everybody's in line like it's Taylor Swift concert tickets, right? Even though they don't even know what the show is at the end of that line. They're just in line for something, right? Well, imagine if half of those people could get their answers elsewhere. It wouldn't be in line. There'd be fewer people in line or more kind of important cases in that line, more relevant issues that are pre-screened. And then the human beings can actually do that work instead of wasting hours and hours turning people away or telling people they're ineligible. And so there is this world in which AI means more humans for the most vulnerable people. And I think that's a better world than the one we live in now, where so many people get turned away just because there aren't enough hours in the day for them to be seen, or there aren't enough lawyers to talk to every single person that comes in. So I think that's, something to be seen, but I think that's definitely a possibility.
Okay. So I want to return to something that you mentioned earlier, and that's kind of the current business model for law firms and how that's not really going to survive. So I know there's lawyers listening who, and there's lawyers out there who are just saying, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. Hopefully that'll get me to retirement, or hopefully this will be a fad and move on, and I can just keep my current business model. No filters on this podcast. What would you say to those that are resistant and that are going to insist on maintaining the current business model? What is that going to look like in the next few years?
Yeah, I think that those who are best positioned to take advantage of AI as lawyers are the solo practitioners and the smaller law firms because AI allows them to level the playing field with the big law, right? Why does big law work so well? They have a lot of people. And how do they have so many people? They can pay them. And how can they pay them? Because of the billable hour, right? Well, what if that all goes away and the small firm, the solo practitioner on a small budget can actually do discovery of 1 million documents using an AI tool, right? In a few hours. They can actually prepare for a complex trial using AI powered legal research um, because in the past they would have to hire 10 associates to do that same kind of work, right? They can actually operate on a smaller budget. They may not need a receptionist. They may not need a paralegal who does that same traditional type of work because they can use AI to build some of those things for them, right? And to do some of that work for them. So I think those who are the most vulnerable can also flip the script and be able to level the playing field very affordably. And that's great, right? That means that there's room now for more small and solo practitioners, small firms and solo practitioners. That means like more access. That means the cost will go down, but the volume of work may go up for each of these, types of firms. And maybe the big law firms kind of shrink and make space for these medium firms, and that's good. So that's what I would say is like those people who think, oh, this is a fad and I'll just let it go by me, they have the most to gain. They can actually compete and leverage these tools to level the playing field.
Normally, when I have guests on to talk about AI, I always worry about how negative the conversation is going to be with, getting rid of lawyers and what that looks like. But this conversation has been really positive, giving more opportunity to the smaller guys and access to more access for clients. So I'm happy to hear that. In closing, I always like to give our tech folks kind of an opportunity for predictions and the crystal ball question. So we've talked a bit about what the future of the legal industry looks like for lawyers, but any predictions in 5-10 years what the legal industry looks like on the client side? So in 10 years I'm thinking about divorce, I have an issue with my landlord, I type something into a search engine or however I'm finding my information. What does that look like for me in 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I think you might look at analogies like the medical field. A long time ago, we didn't know much about how to treat everyday things at home. If we had a fever, we'd have to call a doctor who'd make a home visit in, their little station wagon and come out and tell us what's wrong. Nowadays, we can diagnose and treat a lot of stuff on our own, right? We can go to urgent care if we need to, and there's a lot of urgent cares everywhere. We don't go to the hospital. There are pharmacies where we can get information. We look on the internet and we find information. And by and large, like we're probably more healthy now. We can do a lot of things for ourselves. We can control our diet, nutrition, exercise, and address things like the flu, the common cold, and so on. Well, the law might be that way too. Like a lot of everyday problems are going to be resolved by people at home. They're going to be able to find the information they need and act on it and take steps to preserve their rights. And they're going to save the lawyers for the complicated stuff, just like the doctors do the complicated stuff, the serious stuff, the long-term stuff that requires, a lot more care and experience. So maybe that's what happens to the law. And the real question is that good or bad? And we don't know yet, but I hope that it's a good thing that more people have access to this type of help at lower cost or no cost, and they can resolve a lot of their problems and move on with their lives. No one wants to hire a lawyer and spend time in court and stress out about what's going to happen there. People just want to move on with their lives. And for too long, I think the lawyers are the ones in the way of that. They're the ones who say, no, come to me and give me money and wait, and I will try to resolve this for you. Maybe I'll fail, but that's how it works. Maybe we don't need that model anymore. And so let's see.
Thanks again, Sateesh. We wish you lots of success with your new book, and thank you all for listening. We'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening, and join us again for another Rule of Law podcast from All Rise.